Hello everyone, Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching. So this is not a video to review, but rather this is just a document to look at. So I was looking at the Chicago's Civilian Office of Police Accountability site, trying to find some good material to go over. And I came across this thinking that there would be some videos and stuff attached to it. There wasn't. It was just this report. But this report, I think, has some interesting stuff going on with it. So if you want to skip this because there's no video to look at and see what's going on, I get it, but I still think that this is interesting enough of an incident to do a review on, so bear with me. All right, so this occurred in October 1st, 2019. At approximately 1:56 p.m., Officer William Murphy, number 6066 of Unit 189, was at his home address, loading his equipment into a police department unmarked SUV prior to driving to the 7th District Station. He was on duty and dressed in casual clothes, including cargo shorts. He had an He had an auxiliary weapon, a Glock Model 42 380 cal pistol, clipped on the inside of his cargo shorts on his right side. In a pocket on the right side of the cargo shorts, he had a key ring and a closed folding knife. While he was leading into the rear seat area of the SUV, something apparently caught the pistol's trigger, causing it to fire. The bullet struck Officer Murphy's upper right thigh area. He notified the Office of Emergency Management and Communications and requested a supervisor. He went inside his house and placed his gun on the table. He spoke with responding paramedics and CPD supervisors before he was transported by ambulance to Christ Hospital, where he was treated and released. The bullet was not found in his leg or at the incident scene. And there's no photographs or anything like that associated with this report log here. So it's plausible that when the round fired, it grazed his leg or took a pretty good chunk out, and they thought maybe the round was in him. I don't know. But the gun being clipped to the inside of his waistband, although this log, to my knowledge, doesn't specifically name it, it makes me think of the clip draw attachment for Glock pistols, where basically the rear slide plate can be removed and then replaced with a new slide plate that has this clip thing attached to it and goes around the side of the slide and down along the side, and there's it's like a clip, like a pocket knife clip, and you can clip that into your pant line. Seems kind of, at first glance, maybe kind of cool, but the downside is there's nothing covering the trigger guard. And for a Glock pistol, that is important. You need a holster that is going to be covering the trigger guard, because there is no manual safety on a pistol. And you need something to protect that trigger guard so that nothing causes the trigger to become depressed. Now, was this was this avoidable? Yeah, he could have had a trigger guard on there. Did he think that this, in his mind, this was a good option because he doesn't have anything else in his pant line that's going to get in there and actuate the trigger? Yeah, I could see how he could think in his head, hey, I can put it in my pant line. There's nothing there that's going to press that trigger in. It's a safe place for it to be. And he's probably wore this and done all kinds of stuff while wearing the gun in that manner, and nothing ever happened. But this was one of those 1 in a million chances where the stuff in his pocket had tumbled and turned and twisted just right to press outwards and then hook into that trigger guard and boom, send a round off. There's lots of trigger guard options out there you can get made out of Kydex that will cover the trigger guard only, and it has a string attached to it, and you can girth hitch that string to your belt, and that way you have your gun in your waistline, inside the waistband, and it is almost as minimalist as you can get, right? But the key thing is that trigger guard is covered. That's the most important thing. So we see down here, this guy was born in 1970. This occurred in 2019. So basically, this kind of goes over what happened, and that they're saying that he is in violation of General Order in that he failed to annually requalify with his auxiliary subcompact semi-automatic pistol, and that he violated this policy that he did not carry the weapon in a department-approved holster consistent with the uniform specification titled Holster Auxiliary Subcompact Semi-Automatic Pistols described in that. So in the review, Murphy said he was on duty at the time of the incident and did not have a body-worn camera because he was not issued one for his work in Unit 189, the Narcotics Division. Excuse me. He was at his home address, having already been to court at the Criminal Courts building at 26th Street and California Boulevard. He came home and changed into civilian dress, including cargo shorts. His police vehicle was parked in this driveway, and he was loading it in preparation to go to the 7th District, where his team was going to perform its mission for the day. His vehicle was not equipped with an in-car camera. He wore his auxiliary weapon, a Glock Model 42 380 cal semi-automatic pistol, on his right side with the gun clipped to either the right side of his cargo shorts waistband or to his belt on his right side. The gun was on the inside of the shorts at the front pocket waistband area, not in a pocket of the shorts and not in a holster. While he was leaning in the back of the vehicle of the driver's side with his right foot on the door sill, hanging his protective vest on the back of the front passenger seat, something apparently caught on his pistol and it discharged, firing a round into his right leg hip area. He said he had a set of keys, which included an elongated cuff key and a folding knife in his top right front shorts pocket. At the time of the incident, nothing was in his cargo pockets. He said he did not know why the gun discharged, but believed that an item on the keychain or the folded up knife could have caused the weapon to fire. Murphy said the synoptic report from the Bureau of Internal Affairs was not accurate when it said Police Officer Murphy was removing his weapon from his rear waist area when it discharged. Officer Murphy, in his COPA interview, said neither of his hands was on the weapon. His left hand held the vest, and his right hand was closer to his chest, holding his lunch bag. Officer Murphy agreed that when he stepped into his vehicle, that action decreased the distance between the objects in his pocket and the trigger mechanism of his weapon. He did not know where the fired bullet landed, and it was not recovered. Following the incident, Officer Murphy grabbed his weapon, went into his house, and placed the weapon on the table. He observed that the slide of the weapon had not cycled. The slide was in a forward position. He did not pull the slide back. Later, when Sergeant Martin Murphy arrived at the scene, Officer Murphy gave the weapon to him. Officer Murphy said he did not have another weapon on him when the incident occurred. Regarding the allegations against him, Officer Murphy acknowledged that his weapon discharged accidentally, although he did not believe he was inattentive to duty, and he did not intend to use the firearm in the performance of police-related duties. He acknowledged he did not have the gun in a holster. As to qualifying with the weapon, Officer Murphy said he did not know when he had last qualified with it, but said that the police department's record showing he qualified on it on August 25, 2016 was accurate. He said he was off work for a total of 3 years after that date, with a combination of being injured on duty and subsequent surgeries. During that 3-year period, he went to the Area 2 South Range and he qualified on a weapon so he could be placed on duty status again before again going on medical for another surgery. So I don't know what happened to this guy, but he was off for 3 years for an injury. 3 fucking years. Officer Murphy said when he went to qualify on a weapon to again go back to duty, which he thought occurred approximately August 1, 2019, he attempted to qualify on his auxiliary 380 pistol. However, he was told by an unidentified officer at the Area 1 Central Range that he could not qualify with the auxiliary weapon then, but he could qualify with it starting sometime in October 2019 when the qualification period for auxiliary weapons was held. Officer Murphy said he intended to requalify on that auxiliary weapon. He did not set up a date to requalify because he did not see which gun ranges were open on October 1st, according to the teletype or computer-generated messages that he said CPD put out, telling officers about auxiliary qualification periods. Regarding the allegation about not qualifying on the weapon annually, he asserted that he was not afforded the opportunity to requalify on his auxiliary weapon. Officer Murphy stated that since he last qualified on the weapon on August 25, 2016, he had not equipped himself with the weapon on duty. He said he did not use the weapon as a duty weapon because he is now an enforcement officer in his unit. Officer Murphy said the reason he had the auxiliary weapon with him is because he owns 3 weapons and removes them each day from his house because he has 3 children who come home when neither he nor his wife are at home. On the incident date, he had loaded his duty bag containing his 2 service weapons into his department vehicle. In his defense, Officer Murphy cited General Order Uniform and Property Department Approved Weapons and Ammunition Section 4 Authorizations and Restrictions for Firearms and Equipment, which says the following provisions apply only to firearms intended to be used in performance of police-related duties. Part B under Section 4 requires when in citizens' dress, members will carry their firearms and extra ammunition in department-approved holsters and ammunition carriers. Officer Murphy went on to say that it was not his intention to use the .380 cal weapon for a non-duty weapon. His intention was to remove it from his house and secure it in his vehicle. Officer Murphy added that the .380 pistol, which does not have a safety, had not discharged accidentally before the October 1 incident. He said the weapon fires when the double trigger is pulled. He added that his understanding is that the only safety on the weapon is not touch the trigger. In his COPA interview, Sergeant Martin Murphy said he was working beat 2220 in uniform when he responded as the first officer at the scene on October 1, 2019. Sergeant Murphy said he responded after Officer Murphy requested a supervisor be sent to his location. When he arrived there, Sergeant Murphy observed Officer Murphy standing outside, and Officer Murphy said he had shot himself. When Sergeant Murphy exited his vehicle, he saw that Officer Murphy was bleeding. There was blood on his tan shorts. They talked with each other while in Officer Murphy's driveway, where Officer Murphy said the incident occurred. Officer Murphy told Sergeant Murphy he moved his police vehicle after the shooting so that his wife had access to the driveway. Sergeant Murphy stated that Officer Murphy, in explaining what had happened, told him his gun was in his right shorts pocket, along with his car keys and knife. As Officer Murphy stepped into his vehicle with his right leg, one of the items in his pocket might have hit the gun's trigger and accidentally discharged the weapon. Officer Murphy went inside the house and returned to Sergeant Murphy, turning over the weapon that had discharged. Sergeant Murphy said the gun's magazine was still in it, and its slide position indicated to Sergeant Murphy that a round was still in the chamber. Sergeant Murphy and others looked for a spent shell casing, but no one found it. Sergeant Murphy took the weapon to his car and racked the slide to make the weapon safe. He said the fired shell casing was still in the chamber. He eventually turned over the gun to evidence technicians who photographed it while it was on the passenger seat of Sergeant Murphy's vehicle. The gun was never in a holster and Officer Murphy was not wearing a duty belt, according to Sergeant Murphy. He added that Officer Murphy did not indicate the gun was in any kind of holster while it was in his pocket. Sergeant Murphy said he spoke to Officer Murphy's wife after Officer Murphy had been transported to the scene by ambulance. From the scene by ambulance, Officer Murphy's wife said she did not witness the incident, but she heard the gunshot. She told Sergeant her husband came into the house and he had her look at his wound because he wanted to know if she might be able to just clean it and maybe bandage it. She recommended he go to the hospital, which Officer Murphy did not want to do. Apart from saying Officer Murphy told her he shot himself accidentally, she did not provide the circumstances of the incident to Sergeant Murphy. Sergeant Murphy said while he was at the scene, one of Officer Murphy's teammates, a Caucasian male with a beard, arrived, and Sergeant Murphy told him to notify his supervisor about Officer Murphy being shot. Sergeant Murphy said he knew Officer Murphy for approximately 10 years because they both worked the area 2 South, and their children saw each other at football games. Okay, so Officer Murphy says one thing, and then the Sergeant Murphy kind of tells another thing about what he perceived to be going on. So, what's going on? Who's telling the truth? I don't know. The audio files from the Office of Emergency Management Communications incident, it talks about that. The in-car cameras recorded 5 videos, and body-worn cameras recorded 2 videos related to the incident. So, this is of course going to be well after the incident, so nothing has recorded the incident itself. And it even says down here that Sergeant Richard Steinbrenner, it has no relevant images, and that Murphy's, this up here, it has no relevant images. Technician photographs depict the incident scene, including his CPD vehicle, a blue Ford SUV, license plates blocked out, and its backseat area. Also depicted are Sergeant Murphy's marked SUV and Officer Murphy's pistol, the pistol magazine, the fired casing, in the front seat of Sergeant Murphy's vehicle. I wish they would have provided those. Officer Murphy was upset that he was causing so much extra work and stress for everyone. He was feeling well, did not need pain medication, was anxious to go home. The records further indicate no acute fracture or dislocation was observed. X-rays did not show a bullet retained in him. His wound was irrigated and dressed. He was released the same day. So based off, him going to his wife thinking he could just bandage it, and then, him being there, I think this guy was probably legitimately embarrassed. Like, holy shit, he's thinking I'm a cop. I fucking shot myself. This is embarrassing. So would he have notified anybody had he not gone to the hospital? I don't know. It's possible that if he felt comfortable enough to bandage everything himself and do everything himself, he may not have said anything to anybody. And I can understand why, because that's kind of an embarrassing thing. People kind of have this expectation for police to be very well trained with the guns. People just think police are like fucking ninjas with guns. They really do. And the sad reality of it is that's not the reality at all. In fact, for many officers, it's the complete opposite. There are some officers out there who struggle to pass qualification. And that's standing still, shooting at a paper target. They struggle to do that. Like, that's kind of scary. So yeah, I could. I'm not saying that he would have done that, but I could see someone doing that. It's a graze wound. They bandage it themselves, and they don't tell anybody because they don't want that embarrassment to follow them. But he's going to go to the hospital, so he knows that when he goes to the hospital and he says gunshot wound, boom, that's going to start generating some stuff. Police are going to be notified, and police are going to be looking at this police officer saying, you shot yourself. So he knows he has to follow policy and get a supervisor involved. Number one, that's how the workers' comp is going to kick in and take over. It is a work-related injury, so supervisor has to be immediately notified. And plus the fact, like, he's going to the hospital, like, they're going to find out anyway. And so it's probably better in his best interest to go ahead and let them know ahead of time. And this guy has been, he's been off work for a while. He had a 3-year plus stretch of being off work for surgeries and injuries. And that could be another motivation. Maybe he's not wanting to take any more time off. He might not have many sick hours left. He could be hurting for time right now. He can't afford to take any more time off because he's out of sick hours, out of vacation hours, and he would just be taking days off without pay. So the rest of this, a black belt clip was attached to the rear of the weapon slide along its right side. Okay, so it does mention something in here about describing it. It doesn't, specify brand or anything like that. But a black belt clip was attached to the rear of the weapon slide along its right side. So that's that product that I was talking about. So they did a breathalyzer on him. He's at a 0. And he had not qualified with that weapon since 2016. And then they put on here when qualification times were offered for auxiliary weapons. Sergeant Pardell of the Firearms Training Unit of the Education and Training Division responded to a COPA inquiry regarding whether the black belt clip attached to Officer Murphy's Glock 42 would be considered an approved department holster. Sergeant Pardell said it was not authorized, that a holster must cover the trigger and trigger guard. Right? So what I talked about earlier, that trigger guard needs to be covered. Now the clip itself, is there anything inherently wrong with it? I'm just not the biggest fan of that, but it is a minimalist way of carrying a pistol, not having to have a holster or anything like that. But you got to have something covering that trigger guard itself. So they give some legal standards here, what sustained, not sustained, unfounded, and exonerated is. And they talk about a preponderance of evidence, legal analysis. All right, so here's what they had to say. Officer Murphy was inattentive to duty when his unholstered gun accidentally discharged. The preponderance of evidence supports Officer Murphy was inattentive to duty when he carried his semi-automatic pistol without a holster. Although Officer Murphy disputes that he was inattentive to duty, the letter and spirit of the department policy is for firearms to be holstered. Sergeant Pardell of Education and Training said in his email that the belt clip attached to the gun was not authorized as a holster. A proper holster would have covered the trigger and trigger guard, which were the areas that seemingly came into contact with the objects in Officer Murphy's pocket, causing the weapon to fire. Additionally, while Officer Murphy was technically not in the field, as he had just returned home from court, and he did not intend for his firearms to be used in police-related duty. Department firearms policy applies when off-duty or assigned to non-field duties. So, if he had one of those Kydex sheaths that would cover the trigger guard, and he could girth hitch it to his belt so that when he drew the pistol, the string would tension, wouldn't be able to go any further, and then it would pop off or come off as he pulled the gun up and then be able to present it. Would that have been an approved holster? I don't know. I don't know what their policies are in regards to that. It would, of course, cover the trigger guard, but according to their rules and regulations, it might not qualify as an authorized holster. So that kind of sucks that, him as a peace officer, he could have a non-department issued gun. He could have his own gun that he bought himself, but he can't carry that damn thing how he wants it unless it follows the department policy. So that's a little overreaching in my opinion. Like, if it's not department issued, then I don't see why the department should have any say in how he carries his guns that he bought with his own money and he's carrying on his own time when he is off duty, not doing any damn work. And it could be, which I don't know, but it could be that the agency has these unrealistic expectations for off-duty holsters, and they could say something like, it's got to be in a Serpa holster, or it's got to be in this fucking big, huge plastic block of a holster that is only an outside the waistband holster. Like, they might not authorize inside the waistband holsters because they don't have retention straps on them or hoods on them that keep them in. They may specify that if you have an off-duty holster, that it needs to have some type of security retention on it. That's very limiting. Not very many manufacturers make an inside the waistband holster with a rotating hood on it or some other type of locking mechanism to keep that gun locked into the holster. So would that be fair to an officer who is not at work, not on duty, wants to carry his own gun that he bought and do so in an inside the waistband Kydex holster? Something from like a company like I'm not going to give any company names out there. But just a regular run-of-the-mill, inside the waistband holster that many people, across the nation have, right? Would that be fair for that agency to say, nope, you can't carry that because it doesn't meet our requirements? No, hell no, it's not fair. So I think that's kind of an unconstitutional thing right there. Now, if it is their gun, then yes, I do believe that because it would be their gun that the agency owns, they should have a say in how a person will carry their property. Officer Murphy violated policy when he failed to annually requalify with his auxiliary subcompact semi-automatic pistol. The preponderance of evidence supports that Officer Murphy failed to requalify with his auxiliary subcompact semi-automatic pistol in violation of policy. The record from the Education Training Division shows that he qualified on the weapon in 2016. He said he attempted to qualify on the gun because there is no log kept of when officers go to the range to qualify. It was not possible to check the accuracy of Officer Murphy's assertion. In addition, the administrative messages apparently relied upon Officer Murphy indicate that there were qualification periods from June 25, 2019 through July 8, 2019, and from July 8, 2019 through July 12, 2019. Another period for such qualification was from August 26, 2019 to August 30, 2019. Officer Murphy seemed to have had an adequate opportunity to qualify on the weapon, including in the month of August. So, was this a department-issued gun? doesn't make it very clear if it was. I don't think it is, because he said that he has other guns in the house and he is removing them from the house and keeping them locked up. So this is something else that I think is a little goofy. If it's not a department issued gun, if it's his own gun, he went out and bought it with his own money, and he wants to carry it when he's not working, when he's off duty, he shouldn't have to qualify on the damn thing. In my opinion. And so let's say he has a shotgun. Let's say he does some fucking duck hunting. Does he got to go to the fucking agency and qualify on shotgun? Just to be able to keep that shotgun in his house when he goes fucking duck hunting? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. Officer Murphy violated policy by not carrying his weapon in a department-approved holster. The preponderance of the evidence supports that Officer Murphy violated policy when he carried his auxiliary subcompact semi-automatic pistol outside of a holster. While Officer Murphy did not consider the subject weapon one that he would use while performing police-related duties, he was carrying it on duty, while his two other service weapons were in a bag in his vehicle, presumably out of his immediate reach. Even off duty, auxiliary firearms must be carried in a department-approved holster. Furthermore, the general order Officer Murphy cited in his defense requires that when in citizen's dress, which he was, officers are to carry their firearms in a department-approved holsters. The order does not make an exception for weapons carried on duty, but not intended by the officer for use later while performing police-related duties. The belt clip attached to the pistol was not a holster, according to Sergeant Parndell. Recommended discipline for sustained allegations. Complimentary and disciplinary history. Officer Murphy has been awarded 239 total awards, including 210 honorable mentions, 7 complimentary letters, 7 department commendations, and 2 police officer of the month awards. Officer Murphy has received 2 spars. Both resulted in a reprimand for a preventable accident. Recommended penalty, 5-day suspension. All right. So, all of that resulted in him getting a 5-day suspension. Yeah, losing out on 5 days of pay. Yeah, that'll hurt. But I guess it depends on the person and, how they live and, how much they spend. Do they live beyond their means? Could they take, a week off? Do they got enough time built up? Are they able to cash in vacation time, anything like that? For some people, taking a week suspension sucks. Like, it's going to hurt them. Like, they're going to have to really manage their finances to make sure things are right. Other people, some other people may look at that like, oh, fucking right, vacation. And they got the money saved up. Like, it's not going to hurt them. They don't give a damn. Now, from reputation wise, they might be pissed off about that. But as far as like being, forced off work for a week, some people, it's just not going to hurt them. And in fact, with police work, sometimes the overtime is just so fucking out there. Just law enforcement in general. The overtime is crazy in some places. And so there may be some people who will smile at getting a suspension. And they're like, you want to give me a day off? Okay. What can I do to get some more days off? All right. So all joking aside, as I talked about earlier, covering the trigger guard is the most important thing for the safety of a handgun. Had he had one of those little Kydeth sheaths on there, I think that would have been acceptable. like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of the clip draw product, but if he was using that and he used it in conjunction with one of those trigger guard covers, I think that would be an acceptable way for minimalist carry. I don't think it's the greatest way to carry because I don't think it keeps the gun in the waistband very well. But I think it would have been okay so long as he had the trigger guard covered. People not storing their firearms on them properly has led to a lot of self-inflicted gunshot wounds. The biggest glaring problem is when people take their gun and they put it in their pocket, and then they put something else in that pocket, and then that something else works its way into the trigger guard, and then boom, actuates the trigger, causing a round to go off. That is a common way for things to happen. As far as bad holsters and stuff like that, bad ways of carrying, inside the waistband, leather holsters, I don't think are a very good design. Leather is soft, it's not very rigid, so when you pull that gun out, it's most likely going to collapse on itself anyway. But even on the outside the waistband kind of holster, leather holster, I don't think is always the greatest, especially on how it's designed and everything. There's a possibility that leather could soften up over time, and the leather that's around the trigger guard area could bend inwards a little bit, and when you go to push that gun down into the holster, that little bit of leather could be pressing inward some, and then boom, trigger hits it and trigger actuates. There were some photos floating around the internet kind of showing a pistol like that in a holster, and you could see the hole that was created in a person's pant leg as he tried to reholster this gun, and it hit that little piece and sent a round off. When it comes to wintertime and people wear these jackets that have little drawstrings at the waistline area, those little drawstrings have little plastic tabs on them that you can pull the drawstring through, and it locks it in place, and you press in on it to release the tension. There's been times where those have got caught inside the holster, and when a person goes to holster their gun, boom, it gets caught, and boom, it goes off. There was a video from a gun store where, and I think he's a chief of police, believe it or not, but there was a police officer at a gun store. He's looking at guns, and you see him pull his service gun out, and he kind of like not waves it around, but he kind of like shows it to the person at the counter, and then he goes to put that gun back in his holster, and that little plastic tab thing got caught in the holster, and when he started to slide it in and went into the trigger guard area, he pressed down, and kaboom, it went off. So the amount of people who shoot themselves when they don't holster their guns properly or store them properly on them, it's up there. Even with purses, there's been stories of women putting a gun in their purse, and then a bunch of junk in the purse gets inside there and causes the damn thing to go off. So you've got to be very aware of how you store your gun on you and use quality equipment. So I think that when it comes to holsters, I think Kydex holsters are probably the better material to be using. They're rigid, and they don't bend in or anything like that like leather will do over time. They won't bow inwards, like a nylon material could, kind of replicate what leather would do. That Kydex, so long as you don't heat it up to a certain 100-something degrees, it's going to remain rigid. It's going to remain that same shape. And so that significantly decreases any chances of, when you go to press that gun in, any material bowing inwards and then hitting that trigger. And because of its rigid design, nothing's going to be able to press inwards through that material and get the gun to potentially discharge or anything like that. It's pretty solid. It doesn't bend or flex very well unless you heat it up to a certain temperature to mold it. So good Kydex holsters, I think, are what you need to be using for your concealed carry guns and for your duty guns as well. If not exactly Kydex for duty guns, then some type of plastic, injection molded gun holster is going to be far superior to any other type of material being used. All right. If you like what you hear and see, go ahead and give me a like and a share. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more Monday quarterback videos. Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching.